Welcome to the Peaceful Parenting Podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Rosensweet, mom of 3 young people, peaceful parenting coach, and your cheerleader and guide on all things parenting. Each week, we'll cover the tools, strategies, and support you need to end the yelling and power struggles and encourage your kids to listen and cooperate so that you can enjoy your family time. I'm happy to say we have a great relationship with our 3 kids. The teen years have been easy and joyful, not because we're special unicorns, but because my kids were raised with peaceful parenting. I've also helped so many parents just like you stop struggling and enjoy their kids again. I'm excited to be here with you today and bring you the insight and information you need to make your parenting journey a little more peaceful. Let's dive into this week's conversation. Hey all, welcome back to another episode of the Peaceful Parenting Podcast. Today's episode is a coaching episode with Kathy. Kathy is the mom of a 7-year-old little boy who is neurodivergent. Kathy herself is also neurodivergent, and she reached out because she was going through a hard time. She'd separated from her partner, her son's dad, and she was really looking for some support around that and how to help her son who was having a hard time with the separation. And she was having trouble also navigating things with her son's dad. So we talked about some ways to help her with that and also just general support. And when we came back, it actually took us a few months to come back and record part 2. And she had some major changes that happened since part 1 and part 2. So this was a really interesting conversation that did not go where I expected it to go, an interesting coaching call. And I think that you will really enjoy, I don't know, maybe enjoy is the wrong word. I think you'll really be impressed by the work that Kathy is doing on herself and has been doing on herself without much support from, either professionals or from friends or family. She's really been working hard, and I think it was inspiring. I enjoyed listening to her process and learning from her. So this was a little bit of a different kind of call, one though that I think that you'll get a lot out of. So have a listen. If you would like to be on the podcast, please reach out to me. I am looking for some coaching volunteers who want to get free coaching in exchange for being on the podcast. So please reach out if you're interested in being on the podcast. And if you love the podcast, please share it with a friend. We reach more people that way, and we can really make major changes in the world by sharing peaceful parenting with people who need to know about it. Okay, let's meet Kathy. Hi, Kathy. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to meet you. So just tell us a little bit about who you are.
So I am an autistic PDA mom that was diagnosed late in life with autism, but PDA is not recognized. I'm in the US, so it's not recognized here as a diagnosis, but very much know it's a real thing. And I also am a mom of a 7-year-old who is also diagnosed autistic and pretty sure that he's also PDA. And so I'm just kind of trying to navigate how to learn more about all of that for myself and for him and support him. And then I recently became kind of like single mom. And so me and my husband are separated and living in different homes. And I wasn't at first looking into divorce or anything like that, but things have become kind of more challenging and financially, and there's been kind of threats coming from his way about wanting to fight for full custody and stuff like that if I couldn't financially keep supporting him and what he's doing. And so, yeah, I'm trying to now look into all the legalities of it as well.
Well, that's a lot, Kathy. And for anyone who's listening who doesn't know what PDA is, it's an acronym for Persistent Demands for Autonomy is one way people say it, or also Pathological Demand Avoidance. I prefer the first one. And it's a profile of autism where a person's nervous system gets triggered by threats against their autonomy or any demands on them. Would you say that's a fair definition?
Yeah, it's pretty much. Yeah, nervous system. I mean, as far as I know and the way I look at it, yeah, it just has to do with the nervous system being very sensitive to demands and expectations societal expectations and just causing, instead of just kind of your typical autism meltdowns, more of like a panic attack type of.
Yeah. So, and I've heard it described as a nervous system disability as well.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty much it's very, very sensitive nervous system and creates a lot of anxiety towards anything that is even if it's just like a perceived expectation, even if it's like, you're told that they're not expecting you to do something, but there's that perception that like it's not true or they really are expecting it or just it is expected in general, usually, like, it still causes enough anxiety to really shut you down or make you want to flee, it does a whole fight or flight response.
Right. Right. Well, that's tricky. That does sound tricky, especially if your son also is PDA. So, how can I support you today, Kathy?
So I mostly just don't have a lot of support for the areas of navigating the legalities and like family law and like and just separating, like me and my husband were together since I was 14. I'm 37 now. So we were together for a very long time. And I also suspect he also is diagnosed autistic, and I suspect he's PDA as well. And he has both of us have a lot of childhood trauma and stuff that we have to work through. And I just feel like I'm in a place in my life where I'm more accepting of it all and wanting to heal and all of that. And he is just not quite there yet. And so, yeah, it's just, I was kind of hoping with the separation that would kind of make things more real for him and to see that like things are worse than he thinks they are and that maybe he would take more action towards working on the trauma and he'd be able to kind of catch up faster. And then the hope was that he and I could then get back together, at some point and kind of work on all that together because we very much grew apart. But it just doesn't seem to be going that way. And so, yeah, it's hard to know kind of where to go and what to do about all of it and how to interpret it all just because I've never had to deal with this portion of like
Yeah,
actually separating.
that sounds really tricky. I'm not sure I'm the person to help you with the separation issues or the legal issues. I hope that you get some support around that. Are there things that are coming up in your parenting that I can support you around?
Okay, so with that is like, how do I, because that's been a very, very hard part of this process is seeing how it's affecting our son. And because our son does really love his dad this is all hard on all of us. My son and my husband kind of put this idea out to our son that this is all because of me, like this is all happening because of me and it's like solely my decision. And so I have my son coming to me just asking me like, when are you gonna decide to like get back together again? And when, like and because he's 7 and he only is developed so far for that kind of understanding. I don't really know how to go about things in like trying to explain to him that, I tried telling him it's not just me, and that his dad, like there's two people in a relationship. And so both sides have to put in work and both sides have to be helping each other out and provide each other support. And I need more support from daddy in order to have the relationship work.
So
And
So, Kathy, it sounds like, first of all, it from everything you said, it sounds like you have a lot of compassion for your husband, even though it sounds like things are difficult. And for that, I really commend you. It's hard to keep that when there's disagreements and difficult things happening. And I also hear that you feel sort of torn between, your son not understanding what's going on with you and his dad and feeling sad about that and wanting him to understand. However, I think we have to be really careful to not that there it's okay to not tell him all of the things that are going, like, to not try to explain it to him so that he understands, because he's only 7
mhm,
and he's not gonna understand,
yeah.
sort of the ins and outs of a grown-up relationship. So I think rather than trying to talk to him about, relationships and how both people have to try and all of that stuff, I think that I would just have one message that you wanna give him. And the one message is, no matter what happens with me and daddy, we're grown-ups and we will figure this out ourselves. Actually, okay, I'm gonna change that to 2 messages. We're grown-ups and we're gonna figure this out in a way that works out the best for us. And no matter what happens, we love you. And that's never gonna change. And we always are gonna love you. And that's the most important thing. He'll always be your dad. I'll always be your mom, even if we're not together. So I think you really wanna avoid trying to explain things to him or give him any details, because I think that'll just confuse him and make him feel like that there's something that can be done. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, maybe there is,
Mhm.
and you and your husband might work it out, but that, to put it like super bluntly, that's not any of your son's business. So I think I would just really, every time he asks you questions, I think I would just empathize. It's so hard, isn't it? Having me and daddy not living together. I bet you miss daddy when he's not here, and I bet you miss me. What is your current arrangement anyways with the custody? What's happening with him?
So we haven't even, this is all very new, like it's very fresh. So we haven't even talked about or like worked any kind of schedule out or anything like that
But
for
he is spending time, like, his dad isn't living with you anymore,
no, but
and
like
he is
we went
spending
over for Christmas.
even when after they split up, lots of families do find that they can spend holidays together, so that's something that you could, experiment with as time goes on and see if that works out for you all. But so right now, there's not like a set schedule, but he is spending time with his dad and he is spending time with you.
Yeah, like I've been just trying to get him and or get us together for stuff and keeping dad kind of involved and everything. I was kind of hoping that like dad would reach out like more to him and stuff, but he hasn't been. So I've just been like calling him through like video calls and letting them talk so that he can
Great.
see his dad. But I also, anytime I ask our son about like, do you want to talk to daddy or, should we call daddy? Like he always says no. And whenever like I say, do you want to go like visit daddy? Like he doesn't want to. And I think it's because he doesn't want to say goodbye and leave. And so it's just easier just to not go. But then he talks about, that he misses him and stuff like that. And so I did, his dad told him that he was going to look for a cat and my son loves cats. So I put out the idea of him helping him find, look for a cat. And so we are setting that up that they're going to go out together and look for, our son's going to look for or help daddy look for a cat.
Good.
So
So it'll
we
make it
do
a little
have
easier
that
for
set
him
up.
to go with his dad, maybe if he's got a cat there.
Yeah, so like I'm trying to find ways for them to like spend time together and stuff, but it's just been kind of all on my side taking care of it all. And the only reason I was even because I was trying to take the route of just not saying anything to my son or like explaining what's going on or details to my son. But, I also I can only control what I do and say. I can't control what dad does and says. And dad had already kind of put out the idea that it's all like everything that's happening is solely my decision. I decided for that. And so that's why my son, or, like our son kept coming to me and just like asking me like, well, when am I gonna decide to
Right. I see what you're
change my
saying.
mind
So you were
and
trying to
when.
explain because of trying to do damage control of stuff that your husband had been saying to him.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It's like I was just trying to let him at least have him understand that it's not just me, that it's not solely my decision. Cause he knows that when it's up to me, like I will get things done. But when things are up to dad, they don't necessarily get done. There's been a lot of like not like no follow through on his end quite often that our son has seen.
Sadly, that's something that your son is gonna become more and more aware of as he gets older if your husband doesn't make any changes, and, I think that even if your husband is saying things like, "Well, if mommy would, blah, 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 we would be together," I think that you can still say to your son, "You know what? This is something between me and daddy, and it doesn't have anything to do with you." Because even if your husband is trying to get your son on side or say things, I think you still should sidestep that discussion, right? Rather than trying to explain your side to your son, because I know it's tempting because you don't want to be the one who's like taking the fall as like the quote bad guy. But anything that you do that is going to try to explain to your son is going to be drawing him in more to what really is an adult problem,
Hmm.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I feel like if it was just up to me, like interacting with him, then it would just stay that way. But that's where like I have only half of that control.
I know, it's
And
so unfortunate,
yeah.
and I think you can say that to your son, you can say, "You know what? Daddy" let me see, I wanna be diplomatic about this. I was gonna say that you should say, "Daddy shouldn't talk to you about that stuff," but I don't think that's the right thing to say. I think you wanna say something like, "No matter what daddy says, this is still for me and daddy to work out. It doesn't have anything to do with you." I really think you should still go to have that be your position. That even if daddy's saying that, it's still between me and daddy, and it's not for you to worry about or think about.
Yeah, and he definitely like is very aware um that dad doesn't follow through a lot because as soon as I said that it wasn't solely up to me, that there was, there's two of us in the relationship and that, he is, part of it as well and stuff has to be done on his end as well. Or, we need to support each other and then he was like he stopped asking at that point. Once he
Mhm.
knew like, oh, now if it also has to do with daddy having to do something, then it's most likely not gonna happen,
Right,
and so he
right,
stopped asking.
right. I think you want to keep letting your son know that this is a mommy and daddy issue, that it's for grown-ups to work out their problems and their challenges, maybe I would say challenges and relationships,
Mhm.
and it's not for kids to need to worry about, and no matter what, daddy loves you and mommy loves you, and he'll always be your daddy and I'll always be your mommy. And then also, empathize that it must be hard for him to have this happening. Is he
Yeah.
showing any signs of having a hard time, or how's he taking the whole thing?
Yeah, he's been very sad about it all. He'll just randomly start saying that he'll be really upset about something. And then, I would be trying to like consolidate him and just like empathize with him and talk with him. And then starts saying, like it's no longer about like whatever just initially happened. He starts saying that he misses daddy and he like, starts crying and says that he wants to, spend more time with daddy and that he really hopes that in our next home that we'll all be back together again. And yeah, it's really hard uh for me to hear all that and anytime he says that around dad, that's when, he kind of starts, or dad comes to me and is saying like this is, affecting him. This is and so like using him as like a tactic of like, like we need to not be doing this and be separate and, like doing everything he can to get us back together and using any tactic he can, and using, our son being sad about it, as one of those.
I guess it was about a month or 2 months ago, I had somebody on the podcast who was talking about divorce and what the best thing is for kids when parents are getting divorced. And one thing she was really, really clear on, and this is something that I think would be helpful to tell your husband, is that it's really bad for kids when they feel like they're in the middle. It's really, really bad for their psychology and mental health and their growing up if they feel like they're in the middle of their parents, which is why I was saying that, that you keep wanting to say to your son that this is a mom and dad thing to work out and it doesn't have anything to do with him, right? And
Hmm.
so I heard somebody say once that when you're getting divorced, you have to decide, I mean, and this is a little bit silly, but you have to decide if you hate your ex or you love your child more, right? Because if you're really trying to hurt your ex, then your child is going to be the thing that gets the most damage, right?
Oh,
I think if I don't know, it sounds like you 2 talk a lot. You and your husband at least have, like, some communication going. So maybe just reminding him, like, we really have to make sure that our son doesn't feel like he's in the middle and that we work this out just between us as grown-ups together.
yeah. I So that's where a lot of issues come in, is that he has kind of, I guess, any information that's coming from me to my husband doesn't get taken seriously, or, like, on his end. So communication with me and him has been really difficult because I never feel heard. And anytime, and I just feel very dismissed every time. And so it's just hard to even talk with him. And anytime I try to, like, say things like that you just suggested, he's not in a place, and that's why I had to move away, because he's just not in a place to hear those things if they're coming from me. Like, if it's coming, there's so much kind of trauma between us over the years that he has lost, like, all trust in anything that I say. And so, like, talking to him, just, it feels just like a waste of energy, because I feel like most of the time at the end, like, I didn't get anything I wanted across in the conversation. And yes, and I just come out of it very, like, depleted and very depressed. And so it's just hard, because, like, I want to reason with him and, like, tell him those things.
That sounds so tough. I mean, and sounds like one of those situations where, you know, you don't have any control over this other person as much as
Mhm.
you wish you did, and you wish that you could get him to listen to you or take the suggestions that you're offering. So I think really just focusing on how can you support yourself and how can you support your son, right? Supporting your son
Mhm.
with helping him through that sadness, empathizing with him, answering all his questions with, mom and dad are going to figure this out. We're going to take care of, I guess you don't want to say it in a way that makes him think you're going to necessarily get back together, but that's not something that you need to worry about because this is a grown-up problem. And really
Yeah.
just try to, like, let him know, and as keep saying, your dad still loves you, I still love you, and just trying to really keep him focused on his childhood, right? Like, so you taking care of yourself, you taking care of your son, and yeah, I wish I had this is one of those times I wish I had a magic wand where I could change your husband for you. What are you doing to
Yeah.
take care of yourself, Kathy?
Just really trying to reach out to as much support as I can, just because I don't have family or friends nearby. So I've always kind of had to, and then, without the support from my husband, and that support has been lacking for a very long time. So I've always had to look elsewhere for support. So it's just been kind of me looking for other ways to get support and not feel so alone in it all, because that is kind of what builds the most anxiety for me, is feeling like I don't have any help with, like, if I run into something. So yeah, it's been mostly just trying to find support in any way I can, to hopefully give me enough or like relieve enough anxiety that I'm able to do more for our son and for myself. Like I want to set aside time for self-care and stuff like that. But it's a really hard thing for me to do. So it's all just, and then just staying positive and moving forward and, being very, uh, quieting down all the negative inside talk and all of
Mm.
that.
You have a great
Um,
attitude,
yeah.
Kathy. Like, you really do. You really have a great attitude of just trying to be positive and taking care of yourself and your son where this is when this is all happening.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I figure like if I don't model that, then, it's not good for our son to see, like it's good for him to see that kind of way of living versus, going spiraling downward and stuff because things are always going to go wrong in life and stuff is going to come up and it really makes a big difference how you like take it and what you do with it. And I know from past experience from both me and dad that we have gone down the negative spiraling route and ended up in getting institutionalized with, all of the like thoughts of like, suicidality stuff and all that. And so I know how easy we're wired to go that way. And so I've chosen to completely change that around. And now that I'm like very self aware of when it's going that way, I know how to turn it around and start going back the other way. And I'm hoping that in the times where those thoughts may pop up in our son's life in the future or at any point in his life, that he can see that there's another way to go besides down.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you're already really undoing some of the or not you're avoiding the childhood trauma, having your son have the childhood trauma that you had by all these changes that you're making,
Yeah,
which is
that's
amazing.
the goal.
Yeah. And, and we don't have to think about, breaking every single generational cycle, but breaking a lot of them will still make a huge difference.
Yeah, and my parents have come a long way in their understanding and kind of changing lots of stuff that they do that used to be really, hard on me. They don't do it around my son, or and anytime they come visit, they're very careful with everything and they ask questions before like doing anything. And my in-laws are doing the same, but yeah, my husband still isn't quite at the place of like letting them back in his life. But I'm I've been at the place of, kind of allowing the both parents, our lives and in a positive way. And, it's been really good for our son. So yeah, it's just, I think we're just in different, places in life.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, so much trauma has happened between my husband and I that like I used to think that I could control his, and like force him to like, change the way he thinks and all of that. Like I'm very aware now looking back that I was really trying to change him and control that. And then, till I realized that that's not something I can do, but he's also not willing to look past that point and still
Right.
feels, yeah, the other
Well,
way. So
as I
yeah.
said, focusing on yourself and on your son and on what you can do for yourself and what you can do for him, I think is going to be it's going to be enough. I think it's going to be enough. And or it's all you can do, right?
Yeah.
I also want to remind you that I know you're in my membership and I've never seen you come to office hours before. So I want to remind you that you do have that weekly support, a touch base with a community to get that support.
Yeah. I've been very, very busy trying to catch up on a lot of things because there were a couple or several weeks of illness between me and my son. And while we were doing this whole move,
And we had the
I
holiday.
got very behind on everything. And so I'm trying to, and at the same time, trying to get him set up with a different way of schooling because he's having a lot of school refusal as well. And so, yeah, I just have a lot of things going on. So,
Well, I
um,
don't want it to feel oppressive, like it's a one more thing you have to do, but you just do have a community of parents who really get it and who will, if you do want to drop in even for a few minutes and say hi and get some support in office hours, we're there for you. And
awesome. Thank
and you and
you.
I will check in about 3 weeks or a month just to see how things have been. I mean, I don't imagine with your situation we're gonna have any, night and day changes in a month, but we'll still check in and see how if you were able to manage to get your son, to avoid talking about the details, even if your husband is bringing them up, and really just, give him that, affirmation that it's really, it doesn't have anything to do with him, even if it's hard and he misses his dad and all of that. So hopefully we'll touch base in 3 weeks or a month, see how things are.
Yeah, I really appreciate any advice because I'm really lost with how to go about everything. And so, yeah, I'm definitely going to do my best, at least on my end, to really keep it that way
Good.
in our conversations
Yeah.
about.
Just, I think kids just want to make sure that they still have their parents in terms of an individual, my dad is still my dad, my mom is still my mom. And there is that grieving that they go through when parents split up. And just really, being there, as I know you have been, with compassion and empathy for that sadness, and making sure he knows nothing's changed and your dad's still your dad, your mom's still your mom. We don't live together anymore. And this isn't a problem that you need to try and figure out our relationship.
Yeah. Okay.
And if your husband does try to talk to you about these things, just I think you just keep saying to him, even if he, feels like he's not listening, let's not put our son in the middle. Let's not put our son in the middle. Let's not, that kind of thing.
Yeah, because he keeps wanting to like have conversations around our son about it. And I keep telling him, like, I don't want to have conversations about it around him.
Yes. And I think
So,
it's good. That's great. Just try and hold that boundary.
okay.
All right. We'll touch base again in a couple of weeks or a month.
All right. Sounds good.
Hi, Kathy. Welcome back to the podcast.
Hi. It's glad to finally be back.
I know. I was just going to say it's been a while because we had scheduling challenges and we finally, I think it's been a couple of months maybe instead of a few weeks, like that we usually do a few weeks on the podcast. But some ways, since your situation is kind of complicated, maybe a few months is better to get a sense of how things have been. So we talked about supporting your 7-year-old son through the separation between you and his dad. And then we talked about some strategies around that. So how have things been in that area?
So a lot has changed. So gotten back together, and so that's kind of been a lot of the delay has been just because I've been moving back in because we had separated and we're living in separate homes, and so now it's working towards moving back in together.
That is a big change.
Yeah. And then my son recently got super burnt out in school, and I had to go through multiple IEP meetings trying to accommodate him more and try to just make school easier for him. We tried doing, cutting down his days and hours, and school did not feel safe anymore for him. So it was just really bad school refusal to the point where it was affecting his sleep. Like
my
he was
goodness.
refusing to go to sleep on the nights before he knew the next morning was going to be a school day. And so that's when I finally decided, okay, we're just going to have to, pull him out and homeschool him. And I've never done that before. So I never really looked into it too much. And so I kind of had to start that whole thing at the same
That's a lot.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's been busy and just going through a lot. And so it's been hard to make time for for other things.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Is it feeling like I mean, obviously, I guess you wanted to get back together with his dad, but is that feeling it's going well? And how is your son being through that whole process? I imagine he'd be happy, but it'd also be maybe a little bit confusing about what's going on.
So he, at first it was, well, he was very much, I guess because I took him with me and we were like, living in separate homes, and so he wasn't like spending a ton of time around dad. And then dad wasn't really like, I'm sorry, and I'm getting over a cold too.
That's
So
okay.
a lot of throat clearing. But yeah, dad wasn't really like communicating very much and stuff with him. And so I think with him not being around, like our son kind of forgot all the things, all the like little things that would trigger him. All he could really think of was just kind of that he was sad and he missed dad and all that stuff.
Mhm.
And so when we first decided to, try and work things out and moving back in together, there was a short time where he then kind of started remembering the triggering things because they were happening. And so that kind of like, oh, I miss him so much. And like he kind of kept kind of telling me like, oh, you're going to regret like leaving. And he like, it was very confusing for, I know, like
When you say that, sorry to interrupt you, but when you say the triggering things, you mean things that your son would do that would annoy your husband, like that, those kinds of things?
things were, well, back and forth. So like mostly things that dad would do
Oh, okay. The other way.
that triggers both of us, so like me and my son would have lots of triggering moments and like it, and anytime, and that's kind of why I had to like escape the environment, was because anytime dad was around, it was just tension. It was just not enjoyable at all. And it just was triggering, and every interaction just was getting worse and worse over time. And so, but because we were separated for some time and all he could really think about was like, dad's gone all of a sudden
Mhm.
and he's not like, I'm not interacting with him. And he'd spent some time away from him, like long enough that he kind of forgot
Right.
about all these
So he was
little things.
maybe realizing his dad a little bit when he wasn't living with him every day. Mice with like remembering only the good things or idealizing him a little bit.
Yeah, and kind of like being upset with me and kind of putting all the blame on me.
Mhm.
And also because that idea was kind of put into him by dad as well.
Mhm.
That
Yeah, I
like,
remember
oh,
that.
this isn't because of me. This
Yeah.
is, like this is your mom's decision. And, she decided to leave and all this
So
stuff.
what
So
are your strategies for, I mean, you split up for a reason, right? And now you're back together. Is it feeling okay to you? You feel like there's like enough change, or what are your strategies for working on those things that are hard for you and your son?
yeah, so when I was finally able to separate and have a lot of time to really, because my biggest issue with kind of feeling stuck in the environment that I was in and needing to leave was like I was just always so on edge, and I never was able to focus on my needs
Mhm.
and like prioritizing myself.
Mhm.
And I just felt guilty ever even thinking about it. And
Mhm.
so, and I know it was because of the environment I was in. So that's why I was like, this is something I really need to do, that I really need to work on, is to focus on myself and prioritize myself and, all that kind of stuff. Cause I've been trying to do a lot of trauma work, but if you're stuck in an environment that's continuing the same narrative, negative narratives, it makes it almost impossible to rewire your own brain,
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
that situation. So, so it worked, like leaving for a couple months and being able to, for the first time, really prioritize my own needs and just having like love and respect for myself and feeling worth and all that stuff,
Mhm.
because those were all things that weren't existent really.
Mhm. Been
Trying,
together since you were really young, right?
oh yeah, we're high school,
Mhm.
yeah, high school
Mhm.
sweethearts. So,
So you
um,
use that separation time to get some perspective. on who you were and what sort of how you deserve to be treated, it sounds like.
Yeah. And so with being away, and at the same time, I've been like doing my own studies and wanting to work in trauma work.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was at the same time of like moving out and being separate. I was going through my schooling of learning about more about trauma and stuff. And so with doing that at the same time, I was able to kind of, once I was able to really provide myself with a lot of the, self compassion and all of that and self empathy from, then once I was able to do that enough and receive enough of that, I was finally able to kind of break free from like only being able to focus on that, because I could now kind of like I've been fulfilling those needs. And so now I can kind of look elsewhere outside of that because I was really stuck there for quite some time. And then it allowed me to then begin to empathize with my husband
Mm-hmm.
because I didn't even realize that I was never even able to do that
Mm-hmm.
because in order to be able to provide empathy for someone else, you need to receive it yourself.
Yeah. And I just want to highlight that because that is such a good lesson for parents, right? Who are trying to empathize with their kids. But if they're not working on their own self-compassion practice and empathizing with themselves, they're never going to be able to really empathize with their kids.
Yeah, exactly. And so all the kind of stuff that I've been learning, to support my son, I realized like, I need to apply this to just people in general, not just, our son. And so then, that's when I was trying to apply it to myself and give myself all that grace and compassion and empathy. And then once I was able to do, enough of that, then I was able to start looking into applying it towards my husband and understanding his generational trauma that he's gone through and everything. It all just kind of started making sense.
Right.
And so, yeah, then I kind of, I wrote up like a little love relationship contract thing that like, because basically I was like, okay, we don't have to fully agree with each other on like the ways of like how to do things as long as we're both working towards the same outcome.
Mm-hmm.
Like we can try and figure out a way to work together to get there.
I love that.
And so, I just kind of spoke with him and tried to figure out like, okay, do we have the same, are we working towards the same thing? Or do we want the same end goals? And so I was able to figure out that, yes, we did want the same end goals. We just didn't really agree with all the ways of getting there. And so I said, so that's why I wrote out this kind of contract that is basically just kind of saying that we really needed to like focus on our communication because our communication is very toxic, both of us from both sides. We both gaslight each other. We both do all that stuff and it's all trauma responses. So, but we're adults and we need to be able to catch ourselves and be able to like say something in the moment without it being like taken defensively and being able to kind of resolve it in the moment and so I just kind of wrote out that like ways to have like respectful communication with each other and how like it's not going to be perfect. It's not about perfection. It's just about continuing to improve. We're going to make mistakes and that's okay, but we need to be okay with the other person mentioning that it's happening.
So how's it all working out?
It's been a slow progression, but there's been progression.
Good.
So,
Good.
and I kind of knew it was going to be slow progression, especially because we are like lacking like medical health providers
Mhm.
that can kind of assist in the situation. And it's been hard because so the fact that like I had to pull our son out of school to homeschool him full time means that, he's basically around 24/7. And and so we don't get a lot of, and we don't have like a lot of like family and friends or people that we can kind of utilized for watching him. And so it makes it hard to kind of have those more intense, relationship communications and
Mhm.
stuff. But we've just kind of been finding little ways here and there, and it's been hard, but it's been improving.
Well, that's great. And the peaceful parenting tools and the approach is really just relationship tools. And it sounds like you're sort of doing like a DIY marriage fix and healing journey, which is amazing. And just, keep coming back to the peaceful parenting tools of, I some things that come to mind that I think are helpful in relationships are, being curious and assuming positive intent, and unless you know differently, really leading with empathy. Those are, and also the most important one I think in relationships is the stop, drop, and breathe. That
Mhm.
you can't solve anything. I don't know how many years it took of fighting with my husband to realize that we never once solved an argument during the argument. Like never once, because you're too hijacked, right? You can't think clearly. And when we
Mhm.
finally started saying like, let's talk about this when we're both calm and take a break, a lot of times that we didn't even need to go back to the issue because we were only upset because we were upset.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know that one was a very difficult one because I'm always the one who has been like very self-aware that things are getting too heated for me and I need to take a break and come back to it. But it was very hard for him to like accept that, and it was kind of like he had the worry that we weren't ever going to come back to it and
Yeah.
didn't like leaving things unresolved.
I can totally
And
relate to that, and I think it
yeah.
was like my husband would often try to walk away or, shut the door or whatever, and that would really activate my abandonment fears, and that maybe is what's happening with your husband as well, is that he, in those moments feels like you're abandoning him or something.
Well, he told me that it was he because he's doing much better with it now. But he said his biggest struggle was that he viewed it more as like I was trying to get out of the conversation and I
Mhm.
was using it kind of as an excuse to be able to step away, and that I would just like conveniently not remember to come back to it. And so
Right,
it would
right,
never get addressed again.
right.
And so I had to just kind of tell him, like, you see to trust me that when I say, like, I just need a break now and we will come back to it, that we will come back to it.
100%.
And
And that's the word I was thinking of, is it takes trust to be able to take that pause and know that you will come back to it. The other person, you will hear the other person, but really just that trust factor.
yeah. And I know that we had lost a lot of that for quite some time. And so, but that was kind of one of the things that was in the contract of like, if we are going to have a relationship, we need to be able to have that trust and that honesty. And, it doesn't work without it.
Hmm.
And so, and that's why I wanted to like have it in writing and have it just very like as clear as I can to be able to kind of like refer back to if needed to kind of, because sometimes you can get over time, you tend to forget and lose sight of things. And then you kind of have to like regroup
Yeah.
and get back to it, and
Yeah.
kind of remind yourself of like what matters, what you're working on. Cause, life happens and you get, there's lots of overwhelming feelings. And so you can lose sight of things that are important. And sometimes you just need a little bit of a reminder. But I knew that like if I don't have something very like concrete and written down like that, I wouldn't later be able to give a good reminder and to ground us back to that, base.
Yeah. And I think that's really helpful in parenting as well as your relationship. And I love that you did that. But I think sometimes unless we're always recommitting to being peaceful and practicing the tools, it can be really easy to just fall off the wagon and forget what you were trying to do. Thank you so much for the update. And I really appreciate you sharing that with us. And I think everyone's going to, be able to take something from that. So I appreciate it. Thank you, Kathy.
Yeah, of course.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode. I hope you found this conversation insightful and exactly what you needed in this moment. Be sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Remember that I'm rooting for you. I see you out there showing up for your kids and doing the best you can. Sending hugs over the airwaves today. Hang in there. You've got this.